Story 1. I committed fully and gave them two-finger guns and a wink. They looked genuinely concerned. I haven't been outside since. Story 2. I immediately scratched my head as if I was just stretching, then pretended to look around as if I saw someone else. Story 3. Do it with confidence. Smile at the person and wave even more enthusiastically. It will make them laugh because they will think you did it on purpose. Story 4. This happens to me all the time. Last time, I pretended I was fixing my hair and turned it into a little wave for my imaginary friend. Saved the vibe. Story 5. I like to look behind me at the person they were waving at, then look back at them and make eye contact before putting my hands in my pockets and walking away sadly. Story 6. Once I realize this, I go back to whatever I was doing. It's not as if I was deluding myself into thinking I was cool before. Story 7. The first thing I did was put my hand down and look around to see how many people noticed me. I then walked away from that area. Story 8. She walked by me and gave me a high five, saying, "At least some people know how to be friendly." Story 9. The trick is to do one of these actions, and then the person next to you does it, followed by the person next to them. Suddenly, you have everyone on the street participating. Story 10. If I make eye contact with the person when I realize what is happening, I usually do a comically exaggerated grimace, followed by a shrug and a half grin. Story 11. I don't put much thought into it. I just wave back. I might even walk over and introduce myself. Why? Because we're all in this world together. Let's be friends. Story 12. I've always wanted the person that was actually being waved at to also be waving at someone else who was waving at someone else who was waving at someone else, etc. Infinite loop of awkwardness. Story 13. The trick is to keep waving and stare through them. Even if you are the only two people on the street, keep steadily waving until they walk completely out of sight, no matter how long that takes. Never stop waving. Story 14. I made a full committed effort, realized too late, and turned it into a strange attempt at swatting a fly that wasn't there. I would definitely embarrass myself again. Story 15. There is no way to recover from this, to be honest, especially when they are walking toward you. After several humiliations, I just switched to assuming that anyone waving is clearly not waving at me, and I haven't publicly embarrassed myself since. Story 16. Ran with it. Made them think they had failed to acknowledge a distant acquaintance. It was followed by a decade of depression and alcohol abuse. Story 17. I sat down waiting for my takeout. The woman behind the register kept looking at me. I gave her a quick, awkward smile, and she immediately turned away, embarrassed. After picking up my food, I turned around and realized I was sitting under a large mirror. She had been looking at herself the whole time. Story 18. I simply smile, nod my head, and confidently walk away. It is only awkward if you make it awkward. It is a simple mistake. Story 19. Own it. Laugh. And if they are close enough, literally say, "Oh, I thought you were waving at me for some reason." And then move on. I'm too old to be embarrassed about things that are so common that we can make Reddit threads about them and everyone knows what's up. Everyone does it. Everyone falls, everyone stumbles over their words. Don't try to be sly. Just own your mistakes. Life is much easier, and you'll be surprised how owning those little things can lighten the situation. Story 20. Look down, walk away, and curse each bit of ground I step upon thereafter for not opening up and swallowing me. Story 21. Continue to wave as though you were beckoning to someone behind you. There you have it, repaired. Story 22. I was fully committed. In my defense, I had just completed a charity run. I thought they were people I knew who had come to support me, but that was not the case. I continued walking and eventually found my partner and my group of friends. Story 23. I start running awkwardly towards them with a crooked gait, and then yell, "Have you seen my baseball?" Story 24. Just keep waving as if you are waving at someone else, and they might think they are foolish for believing they are the center of the universe, so someone waving must be waving at them. You might even call out a name or a greeting. Story 25. I thought an employee at Walmart was waving me over to start a new checkout line. The line I was in was very long, and I thought I was just getting lucky. I even pointed at myself to confirm he was, in fact, waving at me, and he nodded yes. When I got off the line and started pushing my cart over, he just walked away. I left my cart where it was and exited the store. Story 26. I did this while driving my car. I thought they were waving at me, so I went to return the wave but quickly realized it wasn't aimed at me. I continued the hand action, moving up to the sun visor to pull it down. I remained calm and composed. Story 27. When I was a kid, we actually used to do the opposite. My dad loved playing the wave game. My sister, dad, and I would all start waving at someone as if we knew them while driving by. I loved seeing the look on their faces, and we would laugh so hard. Good times. Story 28. I giggled to myself, shook my head, gestured an apology if the person seemed confused, and walked on. Story 29. I just turned red and laughed confidently. In my defense, she was wearing a full hijab and niqab. I thought she was my classmate in one of my minor courses, but she was not. Story 30. Make friends and get a new best friend. Once, a friend and I were walking down a corridor when someone reached out for a random high five. My friend wouldn't let him hang, which left the guy who initiated the high five and the girl behind us quite confused. I thought it was brilliant. Story 31. I have actually developed a method specifically for situations where I am visually impaired. I raise my hand to my chest and spread my fingers to ensure that people notice my hand has moved. I then wave with my wrist twice, depending on how convinced I am that they were waving or speaking to me. If they weren't talking to me, I just adjust my glasses or scratch somewhere. If they were, I can act indignant that they didn't see me obviously waving back with a guilt-free conscience. Story 32. I do it all the time when I am not wearing my glasses while walking the dog. The other person does not care. Just shrug and move on with your life. Story 33. I used to brush my hair back, pretending that was the reason I raised my hand. Now, I pretend to be waving at someone behind me. Story 34. Just wave back and own it. Only one person asked why I waved, and my answer was that he looked so happy to see me. I just couldn't let him down. At least we both added a little positivity to each other's day, and that was worth it. Story 35. Oh, core awkward memory unlocked. A million years ago, I lived in an apartment near my university. I had an old-fashioned landline phone that rested on an upturned wicker basket in the lounge room. The phone was near a window, but because we were on the second floor, nudity wasn't really an issue since the window couldn't be seen from street level. Therefore, we weren't too particular about closing the flimsy curtain. I heard the phone ring and came rushing out of the bathroom to answer it. I was completely naked. Anyway, I started chatting away and then idly turned around to find a telecommunications worker up the telephone pole at pretty much eye level. I stared at him, and he stared at me, neither of us really knowing what to do. Some social reflex made me half wave. Even as my hand was moving, I thought, "What are you doing?" He waved back, awkwardly. Then there was nothing for me to do but pretend I forgot something in my bedroom and affect a casual half-walking, half-dancing retreat while this poor workman tried to find something to plausibly engage his attention while 30 feet off the ground. Story 36. I kept walking with a fixed smile and pretended I was waving to someone behind them. I didn't stop waving until I had walked past. Story 37. A cute girl waved at me. I didn't know her, but I waved back. She gave me a confused look as she approached. There was another cute girl behind me that she was waving to. As she got closer, she asked, "Do I know you?" I responded, "You're Amber, right? From the escort site? You look a lot shorter in person. Did you invite a friend to join us?" She looked horrified, said no, and she and her friend walked away quickly. If I'm going to be embarrassed, I may as well go all in. Story 38. It was actually my friend's cousin, whom I didn't know at the time. She laughed about it, and I cringed internally. I later got to know her, and she has been my wonderful girlfriend for 2 years now. Story 39. I approach them and act as if I genuinely know them, which leads to confusion as they wonder who I am and if they are forgetting someone. Story 40. Keep waving, looking through the person I waved to, and moving on until hopefully the earth devours me or I find a corner where I can hide. Story 41. I casually pretended I was in a secret wave competition, giving dramatic nods and smirks as if I had just won the gold. Nothing says, I meant to do that, quite like a full theatrical performance. Story 42. I pretended to wave at someone behind them. When there is no one behind them, I assume they think I am seeing ghosts. Story 43. A pretty girl waved at me. I knew her from class, enough to say hi, I guess. I thought there had to be a catch. A pretty woman waving at me. I waved back. She came up, brushed past me, and said she was waving at a friend behind me. I told her I thought there had to be a catch. A pretty woman waving at me. Story 44. I ride a bike as my main transportation and wave at many people in cars who are adjusting their sun visors. After years of doing this, I receive genuine waves from those individuals, even if I don't really know who they are. It feels embarrassing, but it ultimately works out if you just go with it. Story 45. I walked right past them. I was at work in the dining room and headed back to the kitchen. I pretended I needed to talk to my fry cook. It went smoothly. Story 46. I waved to hail a taxi once, but it was a police car. They gave me a lift to the taxi rank. I was 15 and in a somewhat shady part of town. I decided that vanity was no longer a good excuse for not wearing my glasses in public. Story 47. Pretend that I was lifting my hand to scratch my head, looking away, walking in the other direction, and telling myself that they would just forget that moment if they noticed, as a failed attempt to stop myself from feeling disappointment. Story 48. Take full ownership, smile, open your eyes wide, and maintain eye contact until they look away. Story 49. I joke around with my female friends by looking behind me in a confused way. Sometimes there is someone else they are looking at. I cross my hands, point in both directions, and laugh it off. Story 50. Women, especially those who spoke up and were silenced, mocked, or punished for telling the truth, deserve more than just an apology. They deserve justice. From Megan Thee Stallion to countless others, it is time we start listening to and believing them. Story 51. Wait until they stop waving and look confused, then follow up with, fine, whatever, don't say hi. How rude. Storm off as if they have just insulted you. Suddenly, you are no longer the idiot. They are the impolite one. Story 52. I once mistook someone for a friend, waved, and shouted the alleged friend's nickname. The person reacted aggressively, and I ended up hitting my head on the curb. I ended up in bed with a concussion. Story 53. I always hit them with the old stare behind the move technique. That way it looks like I was waving to somebody else. It works in public, though. The one time I tried it in an empty hallway, they thought I was crazy. Story 54. I stop and stare at the person until they acknowledge that I just caught a stray. Story 55. Adjusted my vision so it looked like I was looking past them at someone else. I died inside and then kept moving, ignoring them as if I didn't see them at all. Story 56. I wave back at everyone I see waving, even when I know it's not for me. I wave back enthusiastically and only stop once I have solid eye contact. Story 57. One of my dad's favorite things to do when driving was to slow down and have everyone honk and wave at a random person just walking next to the road, minding their own business, and then keep driving. The look of confusion was great. Story 58. Not exactly the same situation, but a couple of decades ago, I moved to a new neighborhood. Every day on my drive to work, I saw this tiny old man hunched over with his hands in his pockets, taking a daily stroll. Being the friendly sort, I started to wave whenever I passed him. I had a distinctive vehicle at the time, so he would have noticed it was always me waving. For weeks, I waved with no response from him. I am persistent and didn't want to stop waving, as I didn't want to be seen as rude. So I kept waving, but he never waved back. Well, now it was a matter of pride. Wave, wave, wave. Then the weather warmed up, and one day when I drove by, he wasn't wearing a coat but rather a t-shirt. To my horror, I saw that he didn't have any arms. Should I wave? Should I not wave? Does he think I've been mocking him this whole time? Nope, I kept waving. I acted like nothing was wrong. So I waved and smiled as I drove by. The next day when I saw him walking, I waved again, and he nodded at me and smiled. Victory was mine. After that, I kept waving, and he kept nodding and smiling. Story 59. It happened all the time at my previous job. I would just wave and laugh when they returned the strange, slow glance over their shoulder. Story 60. I usually scratch my nose or play with my hair. I know it may not seem convincing, but I am in fight or flight mode. Story 61. Once when I was a kid, we were in the car. My dad was driving, and my grandmother was in the passenger seat. We passed by an elderly woman who waved, so my grandmother waved back. My dad asked, "Who was that?" My grandmother replied, "I don't know." "So why did she wave to us?" "I don't know." Then my dad thought for a moment and said, "Well, I did just scratch my head. Maybe she thought I was waving?" That poor woman must have been completely confused. Story 62. Panicked, I turned it into a random jazz hand and then walked away as if I hadn't just embarrassed 3 generations of my family. Story 63. There's a bicycle path that runs in front of my workplace. When the weather is nice and we have lunch outside, I greet people passing by. "Hey, yes you. Hey, hello." Story 64. Turn it into a dance because who doesn't start dancing randomly in the middle of the sidewalk? Story 65. I put my hand in my mouth immediately and started making loud sucking sounds, which tend to distract them from my embarrassing mistake. Story 66. I talked to them as if we knew each other. I think she feels the same way. I have been married for 4 years now. Story 67. Agreeing and acknowledging, if upon turning around, seeing the true recipient. Acknowledge them just as eagerly and walk straight out in a way that my 100-yard stare cannot see either one in my peripheral vision. Awkward moment avoided. Story 68. I laughed at myself and gave a casual nod, then went on with my day. People tend to make minor mistakes seem like a much bigger deal than they really are. Everyone makes them, and no decent person thinks twice when others do. No one cares if you realized you were walking the wrong way and had to turn around. We've all done it. No one cares if you accidentally waved back when trying to be polite. We've all done it. No one cares if you replied "you too" at the store when the cashier said, "Come back soon." We've all done it. Laugh at yourself. Apologize if you caused anyone confusion or inconvenience, and move on. Story 69. Have you ever had someone wave at you but you didn't know them? While driving, my uncle used to honk his horn and then smile and wave at strangers as he passed by. Many confused people waved back. Story 70. The truth is, they are often more embarrassed than you, so put on a big smile and go about your life as normal. Story 71. Just smile and act natural. If you are ever questioned, you might make a new friend or have a good story to tell later. Story 72. I recently moved to Manchester and saw someone I recognized sitting inside a coffee shop by the window. I thought she was a new work colleague but was unsure of her name. I waved at her, and she smiled and waved back. I realized about 5 seconds later that I didn't know her. She was from Coronation Street. Story 73. I laughed at myself because what else can you do but laugh it off? Other than die of embarrassment? I feel like silly me, they weren't even waving at me, is a pretty classic mistake. And there is no reason to feel badly about it, so I try not to. Story 74. I turned style points into cringe points. I made the situation 100 times more awkward for everyone. I was walking down a hallway to get to class when I noticed someone making a commotion in my peripheral vision. I turned my head and saw a girl waving in my direction. Not realizing they were waving at the girl behind me, I waved back. The person waving at me started to lip, "No, not you," and pointed at the person behind me. Realizing this, I reacted immediately. Mid-wave, I quickly pulled my hand back, but the momentum pulled me backward, causing me to flail my arms to try to regain my balance. This resulted in me accidentally slapping the poor girl behind me in the face. What followed was us bumping into each other, which made me panic even more. In my panic, I pushed her away, But my weak shove ended up with me landing on the ground and her looking down at me in confusion. Of course, everyone stopped what they were doing to watch me make a fool of myself. Thankfully, most of the audience wasn't laughing at me. They had more of a what just happened reaction and made comments like, "Go home, you're drunk." I awkwardly kept apologizing to the girl, not even looking her in the eye or listening to her response. I just profusely apologized and hurried into class. As class was about to start, the teacher came in and told me I needed a better approach to let his niece know that I liked her. I cringe every time I think about it, and I'm still awkward to this day. In summary, a random girl was waving to the girl behind me, and I didn't realize. I waved back and awkwardly tried to stop waving once I figured it out. I ended up hitting the girl and looked like someone who didn't know how to talk to girls. Story 75. I continued playing golf. Two girls kept waving at me and my cousin. We waved back, but it was as if they didn't even see us. It turned out they were waving to another guy in our group whose cart was behind ours. I shrugged and hit an 8-iron, pin high, 10 feet to the left of the green. Story 76. I approached him and explained that he resembled another person I knew. I offered him a beer to clear up the confusion. Story 77. Commit to the bit. If they make an effort to indicate that they were waving at someone else, just respond with, "And I was waving at you." Story 78. There was a girl at work who waved at me, so I turned to look behind me. Then she pointed at me and laughed. Later, she bought me coffee. I left the job after that, so I don't know what it was about. Story 79. My dad and I used to play a game while driving around town where we would beep the horn and wave at random people. We found it hilarious every time. Story 80. I looked at the person she was waving at. Then I walked toward her with open arms as if to hug her. They found it hilarious. Story 81. I have to walk down the street pretending to be someone else, as if it wasn't me and it didn't happen to me. Story 82. I kept looking excited and walked past them, as if I were waving to someone behind them. I hope they felt like the odd ones for thinking I was waving back. Story 83. Regretted and created a silly game jam video game about these situations. Story 84. As soon as I realized it, I started to do it more in a way that made it look like I was mocking them. It worked. They laughed it off or got offended. A small price to pay for my dignity. Story 85. Not quite the same, but it popped into my head. After the movie Wonka came out, my kids were constantly asking to listen to the songs in the car. One day, while driving, I commented on the scene that played during one particular song, about how someone ate a piece of candy that made them break out into dance against their will. You only saw a moment of distress on their face as they began to throw up jazz hands before the camera cut away. Once it got to that part of the song, I threw up jazz hands to my kids' delight. They were laughing, and it made me smile, so I sat there with a huge smile while I waved my hands. Then I noticed an old man walking on the sidewalk who had seen me and wore a huge smile on his face as he waved excitedly at me. This was just down the block from where I live. For the last year and a half, I have plastered a huge smile on my face and waved at this old man every single time I see him on the road, and he always seems excited to wave back. Story 86. Oh, I commit fully. I hit them with the double finger guns and a confident nod, as if I meant to do it all along. I have to go down with the ship. Story 87. Own it if anyone saw it, then let it go. I mess up like that all the time, and honestly, half the awkwardness comes from being flustered by it. I think being a bit different as a youngster worked in my favor. I had to get used to doing goofy things early on. These days, I just shrug, laugh it off, and keep moving. That doesn't mean I'm never embarrassed or don't try to improve, but it's not worth overthinking. And look at that, now I'm being awkward again. Anyway, take care, and may your next accidental wave be met with a friendly one back. Story 88. I laughed and said I thought you were being extra friendly, then went about my day. It's so silly and human of us to do. Story 89. I pretended to wave at someone behind them, who had quickly left by the time they turned around. Depending on the location and time, you can sometimes turn a miswave into a high five with a stranger for no reason. No harm, no foul. I've done this many times on the subway or at airports. Story 90. I felt much worse when I assumed a friendly acquaintance was waving at someone else, but they were actually waving at me, than when the opposite occurred. Keep looking silly, people. It's better than looking mean. Story 91. I just realized they weren't looking at me and went about my business as if nothing ever happened. Story 92. Move my head and look around. Make it seem like I am waving at someone behind, and they are in the way. Story 93. I'm not sure I understand the question. If you thought it was acceptable for them to wave at you without being asked, why would it be inappropriate to wave at them without being asked? You believe they waved first, but you actually waved first. It's not a big deal. Story 94. Stretch my arms. This typically happens when I'm working, and everyone is used to my tendinitis. My arms are killing me. Stretch. It might not be a good enough cover sometimes. Story 95. My boyfriend blew a kiss to me, and a man crossing the street returned the gesture. I saw them laugh it off in the distance. Story 96. I pointed past them, as if I was signaling to someone else. It may not make sense to point after waving at someone, but I felt the need to do something with my hands. Story 97. Story time. I was walking down the sidewalk one morning when a woman in a car across the street waved enthusiastically at me. I didn't know her, so I shrugged in response, but she continued to wave. I told her she must be confused about who I was, but she kept waving. I finally lost my temper a bit and yelled, "Hey lady, I don't know who you are or what you want from me." She looked shocked and drove off. I thought to myself, what a moron. Then I turned around. There was a large window in the kindergarten I was passing. In the window stood a little girl waving goodbye to her mom, who I had just berated. I realized I can be such a moron sometimes. Story 98. It happened to me and my spouse with a neighbor a few weeks ago. I leaned into it and thought, I thought we had made new friends. Owning your mistakes is a powerful tool in mitigating them. Story 99. Not a wave, but I once accidentally sat down next to someone. It was lunchtime in the school cafeteria. I had gotten my food and was looking for somewhere to sit. As I passed a table, the guy, whom I barely knew, said, "Hey, sit here." I thought it was weird but friendly, so I had no reason to refuse. He didn't say anything after that. I am shy and awkward, so I didn't say anything either. I just ate my food. After a minute or so, my friend came along and sat down next to me. Then the first guy got up and left. It was quite awkward and confusing. I later found out that his brother has the same first name as I do, and he was trying to call out to his brother, not me. My only solution afterward was to never speak to either of them again. Story 100. People who have accidentally waved back at someone who wasn't waving at you. What did you do immediately after to try to style it out? Story 101. I tried to convince the individual that I wasn't waving at them by waving harder at the person behind them. The individual behind them looked scared and quickly walked away. Story 102. I did something much worse. I high-fived someone who was not, in fact, trying to high-five me despite staring into my soul while I walked past. I walked away in utter disappointment and agony. Story 103. I told myself that I thought you were someone else and generally walked away with a new friend. Story 104. When I was a high school senior, I lived in Louisiana and naturally went to see Mardi Gras to watch the women who would flash everyone for beads. While I was in Jackson Square, I heard a female voice beside me saying, "Excuse me." I looked, and there was a gorgeous brunette, probably in her early 20s. She was waving at me and wearing absolutely nothing. My jaw must have dropped because she then said, "Hey, can you stop staring and just get out of the way?" while pointing behind me. To my other side was a man holding a camera. Apparently, I had gotten in the way of the shot. I slunk off. There was no saving that moment. Story 105. I used to pretend to hail a cab when I was outside or fix my hair when I was inside. But now that I am bald and we have a rideshare service, I don't know how to handle this situation. Story 106. Turn around, realize you weren't being waved to, and immediately make your presence impossible to ignore, prompting them to wave back to compensate for the embarrassment. Story 107. Look past them as if you are waving to someone behind you. Run over and hug the person behind you. Befriend and later marry them. You have to fully commit. Story 108. I have no shame, so I just laugh at myself. I remember when I was a kid, I ran to a woman shouting, "Mom." She looked at me like, "Who is this child?" Once I realized my mistake, I laughed and joked with her. Story 109. I was at a water park with my friends when an ex, who worked there, waved in my direction. I thought to myself, okay, I guess I'm not going to be rude. I waved back at him. Then a man, his manager, walked from behind me, waving at my ex. I personally didn't think I would make it out alive. I instantly covered my face with a towel and crouched down while debating my life choices. It was pretty awkward. Story 110. Look behind you. Do you see another person being waved at? Turn around, shake your head, and laugh at yourself while rolling your eyes and smirking at the person who waved. Everyone has done it. Having a sense of humor about yourself projects confidence. Story 111. I just say that I mistook you for someone else and then laugh about it. The other person often laughs a bit or at least smiles. There's no reason to be awkward about it. There is no harm in exchanging a few words with strangers in public. Can be enjoyable depending on the approach. Story 112. Once someone was waving to a person behind me while I was waving at someone behind her. We both looked a bit confused and then walked over to the person we were waving at. Story 113. I just looked over my shoulder, realized they weren't waving at me, and went about my day. They probably didn't even notice. Besides, I'll probably never see them again, so why waste time being embarrassed about it? Story 114. I never accidentally wave back at people. I always wave back at everyone I see waving. Can't be a bug if it's a feature. It makes me laugh and usually makes others laugh too. Story 115. Not really the same, but when my brother was about 7, he was riding his bike when our landlord waved at him. My brother, who was not the best biker, did not know how to ride with one hand, panicked, and did the first thing he could think of, blowing a few kisses. 25 years later, we still make fun of that encounter. Story 116. I committed to the moment with a full double-handed wave, added a little spin, and pretended I was greeting someone behind them. I haven't been back to that grocery store since. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.